I said so on Twitter last night, and I'll repeat it here because no one sees what I tweet yet anyway. The WWE product is like a sort of drug if you're a wrestling fan that's been watching the weekly offerings for a while now. You get hooked to it because you love pro wrestling, and it keeps you returning every week. It takes a good chunk of your life, and it's probably bad for your health in all ways possible, but you keep consuming it, even though a good portion of it is bad every week, and every time you want to quit, Vinnie Mac is there with a free, bigger dose that he reels you back in with so you stay hooked even though you feel like you're fed up with his shit. This was me again, and it's been me for years now, but I've never actually been able to fully leave it for longer than a month or two at a time because, in spite of all of the programming flaws, I'm too attached to the actual performers to leave them for good. So it's a codependency of sorts, like the kind you find in toxic relationships. The Royal Rumble was that big free dose this time around, that controlling and abusive partner in the relationship that manipulates me into staying because, goddammit, I enjoyed the entire 3 hours I spent snorting it up. And that's something I don't say often about their programming, so when I do say it, it's because I mean it wholeheartedly. Anyway, that's the longest fucking intro I've ever done, and I bet it's gonna take me several tries to get it right. Let's take a look at why it was such a good show, or at least in my humble opinion. AJ Styles, Kevin Owens, and Sami Zayn together in a match for the company's most valuable prize. I mean, if that nutshell description of the whole thing doesn't sell you on it, I don't think anything fucking will. But I think it was a perfect show opener because, as we all know, the show opener is just as important as whichever event closes the show. And all three men worked their very talented asses off to put in a phenomenal performance, pun wholeheartedly intended, and AJ ended up retaining with a surprise reversal into a pin that he got Owens with. So that finish on its own isn't the sort of finish you expect in a main event caliber match, so I found it quite refreshing that it ended that way, and I think it suited the stipulation. For weeks, the champ let his big words get him into situations in which he had to pick up the proverbial turd by its clean end, and he ended up prevailing when it truly mattered. So our big hero won, and theoretically, we all go home happy. I'm glad that AJ retained, although that was a predictable outcome, because I didn't like the idea of having co-champions. I wasn't fully on board with the idea when Late Cool did it years ago, because although it's original, I don't think it's a good kind of original, since single titles are supposed to, be for individuals. If Owens and Zayn want to hold gold together so badly, that's what the SmackDown tag titles are for. So go chase those instead. Oh, and they bitched and moaned to Shane backstage, and Shane basically rubbed their loss in their faces, so that was just him rubbing salt in their wound. I don't know why you'd go to the man that despises you for favors or for demands, but they did, and they got jacked for it. Makes sense, doesn't it? And then we got the first of 2 tag title matches in the 2 out of 3 falls match for the SmackDown titles, and it was entertaining to watch. But what else would one expect from 4 very talented performers, right? I think that the only thing that was surprising about this match is that, although Gable and Benjamin dominated the tag division in the weeks leading into the Rumble, that they lost completely clean to the champs, 0-2, with the Usos winning by way of pinfall both times. So that was a bit of a letdown to see, as a big fan of the relatively new team, because I felt that they could have picked up a credible victory over the champs this time around. But don't be surprised if their hunt for the title still isn't over and the story keeps going, with Gable and Benjamin becoming nastier to get what they want until they get their next shot. Badass work from badass performers. Shinsuke fucking Nakamura won the fucking Rumble over the likes of Cena, Orton, Mysterio, and even Reigns himself. Holy shit. I'd say that this was the match of the night, but I'll argue that the Women's Rumble actually managed to equate it, even if the Women's Rumble took a bit longer to get me pumped up again, because this first one left me so drained once it was all said and done. The entire match, though, was just one gigantic adrenaline rush the whole way through, and there was no single dominant performer in the whole thing, like they did with Wyatt in one of the recent Rumbles, which I absolutely hated because it didn't let almost anyone build up any momentum. The only real surprise entrants in this one were the Hurricane and Rey Mysterio, and the Hurricane was only in there for like 20 seconds before being eliminated by Cena, and Zayn ended up taking Ty Dillinger's spot after he and Owens beat the crap out of him right before he headed out for his entrance at the 10th entry, just like he did last year. Rusev and Balor were the first two entrants, with Rusev lasting over a half hour, I believe, before being eliminated, much to the disappointment of the entire live audience and my own, and Balor made it until the very end before finally being eliminated. Bray Wyatt was in there for a while, and Matt Hardy only lasted a minute or two, as he and Bray stared each other down after he entered the ring, and both started brawling and ended up throwing each other out of the ring at the same time. NXT entrants included Adam Cole and the champ himself, Andrade Cien Almas, with Almas lasting the longest of the two and putting on a damn good show. But I don't think there was a single man that didn't put on a good show. Heath Slater had an early entry into the match, but he got beat up by Corbin, who I believe was the third entrant, and he was beaten up by several of the entrants after him while they made their way to the ring before being tossed in by Sheamus, who Heath Slater eliminated immediately after he entered, and then Slater himself was eliminated right after that. Elias played his guitar on the way to the ring, and then claimed that the counter and the match itself was going to stop until after he gave us the performance of a lifetime, but he was quickly cut off. He put the guitar down and the match continued, which I thought was hilarious because Elias is almost always hilarious. The last handful of people included Cena, Orton, Mysterio, Balor, Nakamura, and Reigns and Nakamura were the final two, and there was a lot of tension, excitement, and fear in the air because it felt like the perfect time for Nakamura to win it all, but at the same time, it was Reigns in there with them, so you couldn't know if they were going to just disappoint us all again and give him the win, which might be the reason they went with that to begin with. And then post-match, Nakamura revealed that he chose to face AJ for the WWE title at WrestleMania. So now the dream main event match that has been fantasized about since they both arrived in the company is now actually happening. All in all, excellent stuff, and I feel that this match and the Women's Rumble were the top parts of the entire show. After the Rumble match, we had ourselves the second tag title match, The Bar vs. Jordan and Rollins, and I felt just as the crowd did after all the excitement of the Rumble. I was drained, like cooked pasta on a sink. Well, maybe not like that, but you get what I'm saying. No match on the card was going to be able to follow the excitement and energy of the Rumble, so this match was a bit of a dud, but I felt like it was a good match regardless. Rollins did his best to hold his own on what was essentially a handicap match because Jordan cringe-inducingly faked injury throughout the whole thing after he was rammed into one of the ring posts at ringside, but Rollins ended up getting his ass kicked for his efforts. So Jordan basically handed them the titles on a silver platter, the cheeky prick. If he wasn't hated enough before all of this, he certainly will be now. And then we had the triple threat for the Universal title, and, although some will disagree, I actually thought it might have been the worst part of the show. That's not to say that the match itself was bad, because it wasn't, and one of the highlights of the match, which was thankfully repeatedly pointed out by the commentary team, was when Strowman hit Lesnar with that vicious knee at the beginning of the match, and Lesnar went full UFC mode for about 2 seconds and hit him with a brutal fucking hook that just shook his entire gigantic fucking head. You could literally see the shockwave of the impact ripple across his big skull. That was probably my favorite part of the match, as you can probably tell. Anyway, as I was saying, the match itself wasn't bad, it's just that it was pretty much what we all expected. All men beat each other up, push each other around, tables were broken, multiple choke slams, running power slams, and F5s were had, and Kane ended up taking the pin to help keep Strowman's momentum going like we knew he would. It all felt like it happened rather quickly. It was fine for what it was, but I enjoyed the WWE title match a lot more than this one. And as I already hinted at earlier when talking about the Men's Rumble, I thought the Women's Rumble might have overachieved. And that's not me putting the women down, it's just that I wasn't sure, as I also mentioned earlier, that anything could rival the badass Rumble we saw before this one. It started off pretty hectic with Becky Lynch and Sasha Banks going back and forth like it was a singles match, but by the point this all started I was pretty tired, and it wasn't until about maybe some 20 minutes into the whole thing in which I finally felt like the excitement was starting to build up, because after Becky and Sasha started it all off, The members of the poorly booked Absolution and Riot Squad joined in, and the crowd was pretty dead for the whole thing. The ball got rolling once Lita joined in, because I'm not sure how many of us expected to see her work another WWE match, but it was awesome to see. And although I've seen by now that a lot of people thought that Lita was rusty or off her game, I quite enjoyed her performance, and the performance of pretty much all of the returning women. They all looked incredible, and even saying that feels like a bit of an understatement. As every woman of the past joined in one by one, I kept asking myself, have these women even heard of aging, and do they even know what it means? Because it sure as hell didn't look like it to me. Molly Holly, Jacqueline, Michelle McCool, Tori Wilson, Trish Stratus, and whoever else I'm leaving out, they all put on performances that I think were way better than perhaps some expected, myself included. I enjoyed the hell out of it, and in parallel universes, like in comic books, I think Bayley, Becky, Sasha, and some of the returning veterans could have believably won the whole thing in spite of the horrendous mistreatment that the women have received for months, because they really are all that good. It might just be often overlooked by the terrible booking, or a lack of booking to begin with. All in all, it was great to see Asuka win, and the match was on par with the men's. I think it lived up to the introduction of the concept. And last, but of course not least, Ronda Rousey finally made her much-rumored WWE debut. After what, 2 years of a WrestleMania appearance with The Rock, Triple H, and Stephanie? So that's definitely gotten the company lots of mainstream media exposure, which is all well and great. But I agree with a lot of people when they say that the whole thing could have been presented a lot better than it was. I didn't mind the excessive pointing, because Ronda smiling is probably the best smiling I've ever seen, and that made it plenty tolerable, but I didn't like the fact that it took away from what should have been Asuka's spotlight. The first ever Women's Rumble just took place. Asuka is, or was anyway, the biggest thing in the women's division, and she should have had her moment. What would have been so wrong with waiting until tonight's Raw for Rousey's reveal? It would have been a massive deal regardless of when it was done, and after how great the show was last night, why not the night after the Rumble? Anyway, what's done is done, it can't be undone, and I look forward to seeing what Ronda does in the company. Phew, there's no doubt the longest video I've done up in this bitch so far. This is my real voice, you know, my throat hurts like hell. It's all the work. Oh no, I'm breaking kayfabe, I'm breaking the illusion. So hopefully you were able to sit through it. What did you think of the first pay-per-view of the year? Do you think it was as good as I think it was? Or do you think the opposite? Leave a comment, subscribe for more of this shit weekly, like the video, and if you really like the sound of this succulent, masculine, attractive voice, consider supporting 20 by 20 on Patreon. But until then, this was 20 by 20, and I hope to catch your ass here for this week's other WWE video offerings.